Good morning on this beautiful day. I want to look at Psalm 4. I was kind of going through it a little bit yesterday, and it's a very interesting text. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the background of Psalm 4. But let me go ahead and start reading. Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts, on your beds, and in silence. After right sacrifices, and put your trust in the Lord. Offer right sacrifices, and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. So this psalm, the background is really interesting. Because as King David is reigning, one of his sons, Absalom, had developed this hatred, this pure hatred towards his father. He felt that he was the next in line. In fact, he would have been. Except for the fact that by prophecy, God wanted Solomon to be next in line. So Absalom was very, very angry. In fact, earlier, before this, I'm not sure how many years before this, but his brother Amnon, I think that was like a half-brother, he had killed him. Absalom had killed him. And David was having a hard time forgiving him for that. Eventually he would see him, but it took him a while to get to that point. But Absalom, out of pure hate, was going after the kingdom of David. He was going after the kingdom of David that God had set aside. God had chosen David for king. And Absalom and others, even one of David's advisors, turned against him. In fact, David had to flee with his family, with some of his loyal followers and his servants. So you look at this in that context. You've given me relief when I was in distress. David is in much distress. And then he goes, O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? He's talking to them as they had turned. He's talking to Absalom and all Absalom's followers. How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? Absalom and his followers weren't doing what was right. They were doing what they wanted for their own gain. But know the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. In other words, know the Lord has set David aside, his beloved one. And they're trying to steal that away. They're not doing God's will. Tell them to offer righteous sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. He's not going after for vengeance. He's asking them, set your heart right with God. Get right with God. Come back. Come back into the fold. Don't be separated from God any longer. So he's given that opportunity for reconciliation. And that starts with us in our lives today. That's what God would have us do, in getting right with Him. And then David goes into a blessing. And I'm reading on the Lutheran study Bible. So if you're in a different translation, you might get a little different wording on some of this. Lift the light of your face upon us, O Lord. Let your light shine on us. It's a benediction. It's a benediction we do every Sunday. May He shine upon you and be gracious unto you. That's what David is praying for his son who turned against him, who would try to take his kingdom away, who try to take God's kingdom away. But God would not let that happen. God would not let the kingdom fall into his hands. For Solomon would actually reign later on. After the temple was destroyed, it was Solomon who rebuilt it. God would not allow David because of his sin. But you can see David going through this. He's going through this struggle with his son. He's telling God, you have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. During the harvest, it's a very joyous time. And it's part of their celebration in the church also, that they're thanking God for the abundance. Now, how does this apply to us today? I think we kind of know. There's all sorts of things going on. We've hit numbers, record numbers yesterday, that bring us into distress. I don't care who you are or where you are. If you are not in some sort of distress, I'm worried. I was looking at the death toll numbers, and then I looked at the death toll numbers during the flu last year. Unless I looked at it wrong, our numbers are a lot larger right now in a very short period of time. But God puts that joy in our heart that we know that He is in control of all things. That just as God allowed Absalom to do what he did for a purpose, because he knew Solomon would be a much better king. And David had to pay for his sin, for what he had done. But today, this isn't about us paying for our sin. Jesus paid for our sin. It's about the evil in the world that will exist until Jesus comes back and He puts the devil under His feet as His footstool. And we trust in the Lord going through the suffering, which we haven't seen in this country in a very, very long time. There are deniers out there who do not believe we are suffering. I don't know what to say to that. Other than look at the numbers. Even if the numbers are off, how far off could they be? And when you lose one, I think that's too many. When you start having friends and relatives that start getting sick, it'll start getting real. Put your trust in the Lord. Do what you can. Listen to your leaders when they tell us how to be safe. God would have us do this. God instructs us to do this. But no, sometimes we can be like Absalom and we want to do what we want. Because after all, we know best. We'll be able to look back on this in time, several years down the road, after this passes. Try to be like David. When enemies attack you, wish them peace. Somebody rebukes you for wearing a mask, ask for God's peace in their life. If everyone was just this much of a Christian, what a better world it would be. Just had this much faith in Jesus. Because then that door opens up. And the Word gets a foothold. David suffered, and we suffer. But we continue on trusting God that He has put joy in our heart, and that is more joy than the biggest party, the biggest birthday celebration or anniversary celebration that we've ever had. And I pray that in peace, that you realize that the Lord makes us dwell in safety. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Try to look away from this stuff that's going on in this pandemic and all the other craziness. and focus on Jesus. Because He is the one that gives us our life. He is the one that is guiding us. And He will guide us in the most wonderful ways if we just keep listening and keep following. And when we get it wrong, repent. Just as David is asking his son and his son's followers, come back. That's our prayer for others who have fallen away from Christ. Come back. Jesus is there with open arms. May you have a wonderful day. I think for a while I'm gonna be working on some of these Psalms. There's such rich historical value, and it's in the historical value of why they were written and the context they were written in that applies to our lives even today. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.